So we're up and running with the new PC. I've done the hardware swap, and now my PC glows in the dark for some reason. I've got to figure out how to switch that off. But just to remind you, this is now an i7 7700K CPU running at a stock speed of 4.2 GHz, boosting under load to 4.5 GHz, which is pretty fast. It's got a NVIDIA GTX 1070 card in there. I think it's an overclocked card, incidentally. Not sure how significant that is. And 32 gigabytes of RAM, which I'll say more about in just a moment. And I've got, all I did was I installed the hardware. I had to install all the drivers for the motherboard to get things like the USB bus working and so on. But that's all running now. FSX runs as well. I haven't had to reinstall anything, and it runs pretty good. I haven't done any formal tests. The only issue I have at the minute, I can't seem to get vertical sync enabled, although the vertical sync tearing doesn't seem to be as bad as it was on my previous setup. But we'll get that sorted. So all in all, so far a fairly painless upgrade. But, you knew I was going to say that, there's always a but. I've paid for and installed 32 gigabytes of RAM, very fast RAM, in this new build, but Windows is not using all of that RAM. And I've discovered something that I didn't know before, which is that Windows 7 Home Premium basically will ignore any RAM beyond 16 gigabytes. If you want to use 32 gigabytes of RAM, you have to buy Windows 7 Pro, which I'm quite happy to do, but the problem is you can't buy Windows 7 Professional Edition anymore. Microsoft is no longer selling Windows 7, which is an absolute pain in the backside. So I'm faced with two alternatives here. One is to try and get a OEM version of Windows 7 Pro to install. I have bought nominally I've bought a license for that. You know, what you actually do is you buy, again nominally, a scrap PC with a license code for Windows 7 Pro, and under certain circumstances that is a somewhat legal way to acquire a license for Windows 7 Pro. So I've done that. I haven't yet tried to install that. I'm not very optimistic that that will install. You know, the OEM versions are tied to, as far as I understand it, which is not very far, the OEM versions of Windows, the licenses are locked to some kind of OEM code that needs to be coded in the BIOS of the motherboard, which I'm unlikely to have, given that I've bought this motherboard retail. But I've got the license. I've got an installation disk for Windows 7 Pro. That's one option. The other option is to bite the bullet and upgrade this Windows 7 PC to Windows 10, the Windows 10 Home Edition. I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but the basic Windows 10 edition does support 32 gigabytes of RAM. In fact, it supports up to 128 gigabytes. So, you know, knock yourself out. I think technically I could go to 64 on this motherboard, but I'm not going to do that. It's prohibitively expensive, if nothing else. So that's the next challenge. I think, you know, my reservations about Windows 10 are that a lot of people have reported problems with FSX on Windows 10. Hence my reluctance to go that route. I've almost decided I'm going to try the Windows 7 Pro install, in the hope that if that doesn't work I can wind it back and then upgrade to Windows 10. I hope to do the upgrade route whichever way I go, rather than a clean install. So that's up next. Stay tuned and we'll see how we get on. Well, none of that worked. I tried installing Windows 7 Professional, and the problem with that is it wouldn't install that in upgrade mode. It just told me to quit the installation and to go and use the Windows Anytime upgrade. And the problem with that is Windows Anytime upgrade is no longer available, so Strike one. So the next thing I tried was to install a Windows 10 upgrade, and that failed as well. I tried that 3 times, each time downloading 3 gigabytes of Windows 10 from some Microsoft site, and each time failed silently. I mean, it failed and it did roll back successfully to Windows 7, so I'm not too fussed about that, but clearly it wasn't going to happen. So really I'm only left with a couple of choices, both of which are to wipe everything out and do a clean install, either of Windows 7 Pro with all the possible problems with activating that, or a clean install of Windows 10. I think the latter is probably what I'll do eventually, but for now I'm not going to bother with that. You know, there's no point in persisting. I really don't need that upgrade just yet. You know, to remind you, that's really just so I can access the full 32 gigabytes of RAM. So what I decided to do instead was to go ahead and install X-Plane, and as I said earlier, I decided to purchase the full version of X-Plane, which is what's running behind me. And another word to the wise: if you're going to buy X-Plane, particularly if you don't have a robust or a very high bandwidth internet connection, buy X-Plane on DVD. I think it's 31 gigabyte download. I do have a very high speed broadband connection, but I do have to watch out because I get throttled in peak hours if I go over a certain amount of bandwidth, so I get temporary speed restrictions. Anyway, I got this downloaded overnight, and 30 gigabytes or so. That's just the default recommended scenery areas. I mean, I think it's 22 gigabytes that is actually scenery. If you wanted to download the whole world, I didn't tick all the sceneries just to see how big that would be. My main worry with this is if I need to reinstall, when I need to reinstall X-Plane, if I do a clean install of the operating system. I'm not sure. I've got a feeling, and I hope somebody can maybe check me on this, that X-Plane is completely self-contained, that if I just copy the X-Plane installation directory, that will be sufficient to install it on a new build of the operating system. In other words, I could do a complete backup and restore of X-Plane by just backing up the X-Plane 11 folder. So yeah, if somebody knows definitively if that's how it works, great. If it doesn't work that way, if it's like FSX and is plugged into the system registry and so on, then we're screwed, because that probably means I have to do a re-download of that 30 gigabytes if I do a clean reinstall. So that's where I'm at. Next thing is to just have a bit of a tinker with X-Plane, go back to FSX and just explore the new power of my supercomputer. And just as a curiosity, this is me flying X-Plane pretty much for the first time. I'm in the default Cessna 172. I've flown out of Concrete Municipal and I'm flying to Orcas Island, just because I know this area in Orbix land, in FSX of course, and I was wanting to have a try just to see how it looks. I've got nothing set up except my throttle quads and my flight controls. Got rudder set up on the yoke. Got no weather going at the minute, just a bit of haze. Got to resort to the mouse for things like flaps. I don't have any of that set up. Like I said earlier, I've got to purchase the full version of spad.next to set up my buttons and switches. I should be able to set up the flap control in X-Plane, but for some reason, although it sees the buttons, it doesn't respond to them when I'm flying the sim. But it works with spad.next. I've done that with the demo. The trouble is the demo's expired now, so I do need to buy that version, clearly. Let's slow down a bit. for some flaps. I'm going to have to use the mouse to do this. A nice balloon there. That's quite realistic for a Cessna 172. Go for 20 degrees of flaps from here. Again, one to fight it, which is kind of realistic. We'll go for like 70 knots. This is very poor compared to the Orbix scenery, obviously. And that road, those roads just look terrible. Should go to full flaps, but I can't do that without the mouse, so I'm not going to. Just going to land it long instead. Okay. Oops, nostrils coming up again. My brakes don't seem to be working. Hey! This looks kind of realistic-ish from here. Obviously the attention to detail is not enormous. Not bad. And it is recognisably Orcas Island, the layout. Anyway, there you go. X-Plane.